Well, welcome to this edition of the 700 Club. Was it the drones? Was it the arrogance of America? The answer is none of those things. Those boys were motivated by Islam. That's what investigators say about the two brothers suspected of the bombings in Boston.
And the older brother was reportedly angry with America and Christianity. Charlene Israel has this look at what we've learned about the bombers.
From his hospital bed, Johar Sarnef has started to answer questions. He's telling authorities that he built the pressure cooker bombs almost entirely from directions on the internet, with no help from terrorists overseas.
I would characterize it as really self-radicalization. I mean, these are individuals who may have some connections overseas, but the primary radicalization is in places like the United States.
Still, authorities believe al-Qaeda and the preaching of radical jihadist Anwar al-Awlaki may have inspired the two. Investigators are looking closely at the older brother, Tamerlan, as the possible brains behind the attack. Of particular interest, his 6-month trip to Russia and Chechnya last year. As CBN's George Thomas recently reported, Chechnya has been a volatile region, a place of numerous clashes between Muslim militants and Russian forces. It's also served as a training ground for militants dedicated to the global jihad. Neighbors say when Tamerlan returned from his trip, his views were more extreme, and he expressed anger about America and Christianity.
He said that the Bible is a cheap copy of the Quran. He said that most American wars are excused with the Bible.
A Boston area mosque also reports outbursts from Tamerlan during services in November and January, where he argued against celebrating American holidays and criticized Martin Luther King. More hard evidence is also emerging against the brothers. FBI court papers indicate that one of them told a carjacking victim, "Did you hear about the Boston explosion? I did that." The accused bomber has been charged with federal crimes that could bring the death penalty. Charlene Israel, CBN News.
The question was asked, do those guys succeed or was it a failure? Well, the answer is they've sure got the attention of America. Every news channel has been focused on those two young men, and everybody's been talking about it. So they did a lot of damage, but why? Well, George Thomas is with us with more on Islam in Chechnya. And George, you've just been to Chechnya, and what about global jihadists? Did you find any evidence of them?
Yeah, Pat, the ties with global jihad run very, very deep. If you look back in the early 1990s, Ayman al-Zawahiri, the second in command of al-Qaeda, went to Chechnya looking for a base of operation. Then in 1999, the reports are that Osama bin Laden went to Chechnya and gave support to the insurgents who are fighting. As you look at this map, there's a map of Chechnya and Dagestan. This is the epicenter. This is the hotbed of radical Islam today in southern China, in southern Russia. And the Russians have, since the 90s, been fighting almost a daily battle to rid these Islamists of a base of operation. The insurgency was at the height in the early 90s in Chechnya. It was the epicenter. They flushed them out. The Russians were ruthless against the Islamists. Now they've moved next door to the province of Dagestan. And today, there is not a street, Pat, in Dagestan. The capital city is Makhachkala. There is not a street in Dagestan that has not been touched by terror. Almost every day, there are suicide attacks. There are bomb attacks. This is what the Russians are up against almost every day in the northern Caucasus.
Link those two boys to one of these groups, or do you have a link?
You know, the big question now is the older brother. In 2012, January, he apparently took a flight from JFK to Moscow, and then from Moscow landed in Makhachkala. I was just there several months ago. He spent 6 months. Investigators are trying to figure out what did this older brother do for 6 months in Russia, in this part of Russia. And apparently 2 years ago, the Russian intelligence service contacted the FBI and said, guys, listen, there are these two brothers who are from Chechnya. They have spent a lot of time on radical Islamist groups. You need to keep an eye on them. The FBI went in, interrogated these two individuals, found that there was no connection. And then in January 2012, the older brother takes a flight from JFK to Moscow. The reports are the airline misspelled his name. Therefore, the FBI nor the Russian intelligence knew he was coming back to this volatile region. So now all the focus is on this Dagestan region. What did this older brother do for 6 months? They don't know. They're still trying to figure that out. But clearly, when he returned in August of 2012, he set up a website, a YouTube channel. And within the first weeks of setting up this YouTube channel, you could see the radicalization of his mind, because he started to post various sermons by the top jihadists from this region in Russia, talking about how young people need to go out there, commit suicide attacks, that it's about Islam, it's about Sharia law, it's about, taking the principles of Islam and keeping them within your being.
What is it that grabs somebody's mind when they do that? What is it? I mean, his mind was captured.
Yeah.
How do they do it?
I think it's a combination of factors. The brothers came here 10 years ago. They were young. The oldest was 9 years old. The oldest was 16. The youngest was 9 years old. They came from a region. They remember their history. You see, they remember their background, their ethnicity. Chechnya was in the middle of a brutal war. They understood it from the stories from their parents, perhaps, of the brutality of the Russians and the fighting with the Islamic radicals. And so they spent 10 years. The older got into boxing. He was smoking. He was drinking. And then about 3 years ago, something happened where he and his mother apparently started to become very devout, and it caused a rift within the family. The husband said to the wife, listen, you are becoming too radical. She started to wear the hijab. She was fully veiled. The older brother started telling the father, listen, we have to devote ourselves to Islam. And in fact, the father said, I've had enough of this. I'm going back to Dagestan. And so it caused a rift within the family.
George, everybody talks about Islam as the religion of peace. You've been all over the world. Every time you encounter it, there's persecution, there is mayhem, there's slaughter. There's just a bloodlust in this religion.
Absolutely, yeah, there is. And it's, the untold story. One of the reasons I went to Dagestan several months ago was to do the story of the secret believers who are today walking the streets of Dagestan, and they're quietly sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. One of the organizations I went with, they said, look, our goal, we know we are at the epicenter of radical Islam today in Russia. Our goal is to reach the young people. Before they see the videos of the beheadings, before they hear the call to Allah and the call to Islamic Sharia law, we need to penetrate them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so they're working quietly. And in the process, they lose their life. In the process, they face daily persecution because they're going out sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with these vulnerable young men and women.
Well, George, we appreciate it, and please, dear brother, get some rest. You've been bouncing around the globe like a satellite. I'm glad to see you. Thank you.
Brother. Thanks.
Well, a well-known liberal has raised his own objections to Islam, and that was on his TV show. Lee Webb has that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's Lee.
That's surprising, Pat. Talk show host Bill Maher surprised his audience as well as his guest on his HBO program this past Friday night. Maher was interviewing Brian Levin, the director of an organization called the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism, and they were talking about the Boston Marathon bombings and the religious aspects of terrorism.
But could I just interject? Look, it's not like people who are Muslim who do wacky things have a monopoly on it. We have hypocrites across faiths, Jewish, Christian.
They're not as dangerous. I mean, there's only one faith, for example, that kills you or wants to kill you if you draw a bad cartoon of the prophet. There's only one faith that kills you or wants to kill you if you renounce the faith. An ex-Muslim is a very dangerous thing.
Bill Maher said he realizes most Muslims are not terrorists, but he said violence is more than just a fringe element in Islam. Pat, what in the world has gotten into Bill Maher? Is he becoming a conservative all of a sudden?
No, I think the dawning of the truth. You can't kill with so many people in the Boston Marathon. I mean, this is the heart of the Irish Catholics. I don't know what Bill is, but this has struck a blow at the people that he loves, and I think that he begins to see, and people begin to see what we're dealing with. These are radical people. You know, our Eric Stakelbeck yesterday said there were 50 scriptures in the Quran and the Hadith that urged people to go out and commit acts of violence against unbelievers and to wage jihad. So I've asked our staff to assemble those 50 scriptures, put them on a little booklet, and then we're going to give them to you. So everybody will have one to say, okay, don't say that this great religion has been hijacked by evil people. This is the core of this religion. Here is the teaching of their founder, Muhammad.